Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to proceed with the ceremony of the transfer of the chairmanship of the summit process of the Americas. Embajadores, distinguidos invitados, vamos a proceder.
Ambassadors, distinguished guests, we're going to now proceed with the transfer of chairmanship of the Summit of the Americas process.
Secretary General Luis Almagro, the Assistant Secretary General Nestor Mendez, Ambassador Luis Chávez, Director General for Multilateral and Global Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Peru, and outgoing Chairman of the Summit Process of the Americas, Ambassador Michael G. Kosak, Acting Assistant Secretary, Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs of the United States of America, and incoming Chair of the Summit Process of the Americas, Ambassador James Lambert, Secretary for Hemispheric Affairs of the OAS, and Mrs. Maria Celina Conte, Acting Director of the Summit of the Americas. Ambassador Nestor Mendez, of course, he's part of the ceremony as Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States. And I won't take more of your time, and I will give the floor to the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro. Secretary, you have the floor.
Gracias, Ana. Embajador.
Thank you, Ana. Ambassador Luis Enrique Chávez, National Coordinator of Peru for the Summits process of the Foreign Ministry of Peru, Ambassador Michael Kosak, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Western Hemispheric Affairs of the USA. Friends, with this handover of power, we come to the close of the chairmanship of the summits process that led to a lot of benefits being achieved and taking on a number of challenges to the process of the main diplomatic tool for diplomacy in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's important to understand and acknowledge the work done by Peru under the leadership of President Martin Vizcarra and of his foreign ministry, by Nestor Populis in particular. They were able to steward the work over the last few years of organization and boosting the work of the OAS. Over the last 5 years, we have worked to relaunch the summit as the main integration forum in the hemisphere. This has been a critical time for the summit's process, and I wish to highlight the main milestones reached. Adopting for the first time by consensus the hemispheric agenda, which was on such an important topic, fighting corruption. The adoption and implementation of the monitoring and implementation mechanism of the Lima Commitment, the first of the summit's process, and based on the indicators have allowed states and organizations of the Joint Summits Working Group to increase their achievements regarding their mandates. Also, reestablishing the Joint Summits Group in September 2018, all of the members signed an MOU to bolster its role. This was along with the joining of the OECD in 2019, and also the work we've been doing with high authorities who all came together to coordinate support for institutions and for countries to take on and respond to COVID-19 and help with their recovery. Increasing civil society participation as well as the public throughout the entire process for the 8th Summit is another achievement. Here we can highlight the participation of representatives of the youth, the private sector, and indigenous groups at the summit who all presented the recommendations to the leaders of the hemisphere. Given the leadership and throughout this entire process, the efforts carried out, we commend Peru. Ambassador Kosak.
Present in every transfer of the chair since the first summit in Quebec City. The statue was created by the Inuit indigenous people of North America, which originally was used as a landmark for those who traveled through uninhabited indicated territories, indicated that someone have been there. You're on the right path. The Inukshuk is also a symbol of the unity of our people towards a common goal and objective. The third summit launched the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which, like the Inukshuk, has served as a guide and reference for the last 19 years to guide us on the democratic path of our region. The Charter will be 20 years old in 2021 and will undoubtedly serve as an inspiration to the countries of the Hemisphere as we head toward the 9th Summit of the Americas chaired by the United States. The summit's process had its beginning 26 years ago in the city of Miami. We now continue with the summit's process chaired by the United States government with full confidence that our region will continue to be strengthened. The crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in the world and the region represents a tremendous challenge with high human, economic, and social cost. However, I'm sure that the new chair will be able to continue building on the progress achieved together with all the actors of the summit's process to turn this challenge into an opportunity for our countries to recover and to restore the well-being of the citizens of the Americas. Ambassador Kosak counts on the full commitment of the OAS and in particular the summit secretariat to work as a team and continue guiding the summit's process to further strengthen the progress made in recent years and thus achieve the objectives that the new chair will set forth towards the preparation for the 9th Summit of the Americas in 2021 and its subsequent process. Thank you very much. Gracias, Ana. Gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias, secretario general. And we'll give the floor, le damos la palabra al embajador Luis Enrique Chávez, director general para Asuntos Multilaterales y Globales del Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores del Perú y presidente saliente del Enrique Chávez, Director General for Multilateral and Global Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Peru, and outgoing chairman.
¿Estate listo? Ya. Ambassador Chávez, you have the floor, sir. Thank you very much. Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the OAS, Michael Kosak, Acting Assistant Secretary Ambassador for the Summit of the Americas process, distinguished representatives of the Secretariat of the OAS and certainly Assistant Secretary General of the same. It was indeed a little over 4 years, the 10th of May of 2016 to be precise, that Peru assumed the chairmanship of the process of the Summit of the Americas. We were well aware that for some years, the countries of the Hemisphere had not managed to generate sufficient trust in that process in order to truly nail significant milestones in the same. That's why we put our heads together to really try to come up with something that would galvanize us and come up with a common will. And we recognized, as we did so, that many countries were in the grips to corruption that was, even for corruption's sake, unprecedented in our area. And that is why we felt it necessary to determine how we might attack that evil, as it was undermining our countries, undermining our judicial structures, our social fabric, and indeed democracy itself. That is why Peru considered that it was so important. We have lost the ambassador's sound. The interpreter regrets. He's back again. Thank you. And that is why Peru considered that it was important to decide together to stand up against that scourge. And our president, Martin Vizcarra, as he inaugurated the summit, launched, and I quote, a new regional alliance against corruption. This would have to be through common efforts to end impunity and strengthen our institutions. We decided from the start that it wasn't simply the countries, the states of the region that needed to be brought in, but certainly the social fabric, civil society, and this was done as well as the business people, bringing together all of their very valuable support in the summit implementation working group. We established for that year, 2017, 3 main axes Governance, democratic governance and corruption was one, corruption and sustainable development was another, and aspects of cooperation, international institutionality, and public-private alliances. From that, we drafted the February 28th final version of the statement that was put to the heads of state that attended the 8th Congress and the 4 previous regular meetings of the surge. And this is what led to our work at that time. We were very, very satisfied that this document, known as the Lima Commitment, was adopted by consensus. It not only takes us back to a previous sense of the importance of the summit process, but it is a renewed roadmap, 17 different and common mandates to fight against corruption. Now, the 8th Summit also reaffirmed that the defense of democracy, which is what buttresses that fight against corruption, needed to be kept front and center. That statement, signed by the 17 heads of state who participated, focused particularly on the joint statement on the crisis in Venezuela and established that we would continue to fight until that country again sees free, fair, and legitimate elections. We know that from its collapse of constitutional order and the rule of law, the situation has not ceased to worsen. So we look to what's ahead. Now, social actors, as I mentioned, are a main point to mention. It's particularly gratifying to note how successful we've been in bringing them in. 18 different coalitions, 28, I should say, different coalitions brought together with the summit secretariat, generated different national consultations, both in person and virtually. We know that during the summit process itself, they were very active indeed. And here was a breakthrough. We gave them the floor. Now that precedent has maintained. We believe it is a very healthy and a noteworthy step forward, which will continue to strengthen us all. Another point that I think is worth underscoring that stems from the 8th Summit was the adoption and the launching of the follow-up and implementation mechanism of the Lima Commitment. We needed to be sure that there would be a follow-through, and that, as we stated in Peru, would have to take into account the lessons learned as a result of the ratification and the putting in practice of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, as well as the UN Convention Against Corruption. And the first phase of a rundown of breakthroughs, which was launched last January, has been met by 16 states and 8 entities of the surge. Let me now turn to heartfelt gratitude that I express towards many. But above all, if I may, as I offer this brief overview of how far we've come, let me principally salute the will of the member states that have become so engaged in the process, as well as their principal actors who have not ceased to move for the strengthening of governance, democracy, and the fight against corruption. Let me also salute here organizations such as the IDB and the Young America's Business Trust, both institutions that were very much significant in the holding of the 3rd summit, business summit, which was entitled Made in the Americas, as well as the 5th Forum of Young People in the Americas. I'd like to state that the fact that the ongoing support of the surge is certainly something we all hail. It has worked very closely and indeed is a member of the OECD, and that says everything we need to state. It has been very instrumental in our fight to continue implementing the Lima Commitment. Let me also salute here Ambassador James Lambert, Ms. Maria Celina Conte, and their respective teams, all tremendous movers and shakers in the Summit Secretariat. As I bid you farewell, let me say that Peru, as it hands over this chairmanship of the summit process in the Americas, does so absolutely convinced that we need more than ever to close ranks and to fix our eyes on tangible results. We are now in the grips of a terrible pandemic which doesn't care at all about borders, and we must, in order to overcome it, be sure of the challenges and sure also that no one can go it alone. We must strengthen multilateralism and concretely through processes such as the Summit of the Americas process. The United States is the cradle of this process, and we are convinced that it will certainly, with its enormous experience and diplomatic know-how, will hold the 9th summit. And please know you count on Peru so to do. Esteemed Ambassador Kosak, these expressions of our past is indeed the common space which we call America, symbolized in the figure of the Inukshuk, which used to be found along the road to tell people they were on the right way and to encourage them as they met new challenges. Let me offer a symbolic and virtual Inukshuk to you to serve as a guide and a symbol of unity to you and to us all as we strive to achieve our common goals. I thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Chávez, outgoing chair of the process.
Summit process of the Americas. Incoming chair and acting assistant secretary general for Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs of the United States of America. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Secretary General Almagro and Director General Chávez. And I also would like to thank the Summit of the Americas Secretariat for hosting this event and doing such a fine job. I am pleased to represent the United States as we assume the chair of the Summit of the Americas process. And I was pleased to receive the Inukshuk the other day. It arrived here at the department and will accompany us through this, through our term as the chair of the summit. We look forward to the opportunity to collaborate with the partner governments, the private sector, civil society, and youth from around the region. They and the institutions of the Joint Summit Working Group will help us develop a relevant agenda for our leaders at the 9th Summit of the Americas to advance our common priorities in these unprecedented times. Now, this marks the first time the United States has hosted the Summit of the Americas since the inaugural meeting in Miami in 1994. We are a longstanding partner of free nations. We will work together to advance prosperity and democratic values. The United States is also, though, proud to celebrate Peru's stewardship of and vision for the Summit of the Americas process. The region faced the political and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela under the Maduro regime. Peru used its role as summit host to refocus the summit around the forum's founding principles, democracy and economic growth. Under Peru's leadership, the summit took on one of the most pressing issues facing our region: democratic governance against corruption. The emphasis on collective action with respect to a specific issue led to a true consensus in the adoption of the Lima Commitment. The 9th Summit of the Americas will build on the transparency and anti-corruption principles of the Lima Commitment. Next year will mark the 20th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, as the Secretary General mentioned. The 9th Summit will reaffirm our region's commitment to protecting democratic institutions while strengthening our economies. Our Vice President, Mike Pence, led the U.S. delegation to the 8th Summit in Peru and offered to host the 9th Summit in the United States in 2021. He could not have anticipated the challenges that we now face, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but globally. The 9th Summit will occur as our region recovers from the coronavirus pandemic. The United States will support the global economic recovery as the world's largest economy, and we will remain the most generous humanitarian donor and the most steadfast partner of the people of the Americas. However, governments alone will not propel economic recovery. It will depend on the acts of individual investors and the hard work of our citizens. And there is no limit to what they can accomplish given the right environment. And in that respect, the Summit of the Americas can contribute.
The United States will ensure the participation of democratic leaders and effective institutions, as well as the diverse voices from the private sector and civil society, including marginalized and vulnerable groups. All over the Americas, citizens are increasingly demanding more accountable and effective governance. Summit priorities must reflect the practical needs of the people and industry in the Americas. The United States has supported the participation of independent civil society representatives from every country in the region in the Summit of the Americas. We actively support the work of the Citizen Forum of the Americas to organize and formalize civil society participation in the summit process. As the summit host, we look forward to providing the opportunity for independent civil society leaders to interact directly with government representatives. The United States enthusiastically supports the incorporation of regular consultations with the private sector as an integral part of the summit process through the Inter-American Business Dialogue. The CEO Summit of the Americas will convene business leaders to work with governments on improving economic growth and fighting corruption. Increased high-quality private sector investment will be critical to economic growth. The United States has long been bound together with our partners by geography, economic and cultural ties, and shared values such as democracy, freedom, protection of human rights, and the rule of law. Through the Summit of the Americas, we can work together to address the region's shared challenges and opportunities and advance freedom, prosperity, and the security of our hemisphere. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with the Organization of American States to maintain collective defense of democracy as a top priority for the hemisphere. This includes efforts to restore democracy in Venezuela and end the suffering of Venezuelans under the illegitimate Maduro regime. It also means restoring democracy in Nicaragua and holding the Cuban regime accountable for its abuses. In closing, I would like to thank Secretary General Almagro, Ambassador Chavez, the Summit Secretariat, and the Joint Summit Working Group and National Summit Coordinators for all the support. Thanks to your effort, the Summit continues to serve as the premier forum to address the challenges of our hemisphere and create opportunities for all the people of the Americas. Working alongside of all of you, the United States will utilize our role as host to ensure that the 9th Summit of the Americas advances freedom, prosperity, and security for all of us, and is just as successful as was the 8th Summit of the Americas under the leadership of our colleagues from Peru. Thank you very much, and look forward to the rest of the ceremony.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kosak, incoming chair of the summit process of the Americas. I would ask the Secretary General, Ambassador Chavez and Ambassador Kosak, to remain, but before closing, I would also like to recognize Ambassador Jose Manuel Bosa, Permanent Representative of Peru to the OAS, and Ambassador Carlos Trujillo, Permanent Representative of the United States of America to the OAS. And after this recognition, the ceremony is finished. Thank you all very much. And you three stay on board for the final photograph of this ceremony. Thank you. Ceremony has concluded.